Clemens Kool, and today I'm the pro-rector at this PhD defense. In this ceremony, Gbenoukpo Robert Djidonou will defend the academic thesis, Essays on Labor Dynamics and Industrial Growth, Supply Chains, Innovation and Informality. Dear candidate, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis? The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Prorator. Dear Prorator, dear member of the Corona, dear supervisors, family, and friends, welcome to my defense on Essay on Labor Dynamic and Industrial Growth, the role of the supply chains, innovation, and informality. So in the coming 15 minutes, I will start from the motivation and the research gap, and go quickly to the results and the conclusions from each of the chapters of this thesis, and finally move to the conclusions and the different contributions. So let me start from the motivation. The motivation starts from the role of the manufacturing sector, which is a very important cornerstone for economic development, for its role leading to the structural transformation, technology diffusion, and industrial growth. However, many developing countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, there is kind of premature deindustrialization happening where workers are moving mainly from the agriculture sector to the service or low productive sectors in the expenses of the manufacturing sector. So this stagnation reflects not only the market failure, but also the deeper systemic inefficiencies related not only to the persistence of the informality, the fragmentation of the supply systems, and the precarious labor market. So this thesis investigates these challenges by developing a theoretical, grounded, and empirical informed analysis of industrial dynamics. So the existing models often underestimate the role of institutions in shaping the manufacturing outcomes. So the role of this thesis is mainly to bring the role of institutions in the outcome from the manufacturing sector, especially the informal sector, how informal sector is playing a role of drag on the manufacturing sector, and how it's playing a role in the stagnation that it's facing. And then we move to another chapter, which is about the informal-formal supply chains as a solution or as an approach to improve the productivity of the firms and to improve the aggregate productivity at the end. And then finally, another chapter was about the labor market and the contract worker, the reliance on contract workers, how this is affecting as well some economic outcome and firm outcomes at the firm level. So the overarching objective is to understand how these factors constrain manufacturing's growth and identify policy levels for sustainable and inclusive industrial development. So as contribution, first of all, this thesis is explaining the persistence of underperformance of manufacturing sector in developing countries, especially in Africa and South Asia. So, and secondly, it's also bring back the role of informality and human capital deficit into the contemporary debates on industrial policy by highlighting how these factors mediate manufacturing outcomes. And thirdly, it's testing one of the neoclassical assumptions, which is regarding the labor market deregulation, by presenting an empirical evidence that contract employment can systematically undermine innovation. So let me start from the first chapter, which is about the second chapter, sorry, which is about the informality and how it's affecting manufacturing. So as I mentioned in the introduction, in India, the manufacturing sector is stagnant, despite there is economic liberalization. So this stagnation combined with the fact that more than 90% of the manufacturing employment is in the informal segments, leads us to the empirical study, which is to assess the impact of the informal manufacturing segment on aggregate productivity, and also to quantify the drag caused by the shift of workers between formal and informal sector. So the data and data source that we use here is the Indian claims data from 1980 to 2011. This data is disaggregated, well-disaggregated data into the different segments of formal and informal sectors for 13 manufacturing subsectors. For mainly two variables that we need in this work, which are the value added and the employment data information that we already use here. Then regarding the methodology, we use two methodologies. One is about the counterfactual analysis, and the other one is about the modified shift-share decomposition. So regarding the counterfactual analysis, so the idea is to see, okay, if the workers are moving, if all the workers who are informal, if all of them move to the formal segment of the manufacturing sector, what would have happened? And the second evidence, the second counterfactual was about whether the movement or bringing all those informal workers into the agriculture sectors, what would have happened as well. So then after that, we use the shift-share decomposition to study the possible source of the drag or what have happened during these counterfactual situations. So as the founding of this second chapter, we found that informality constituted a drag on productivity growth in the manufacturing sector, irrespective of the counterfactual exercise. And in invested the possible source, we use now the shift-share analysis to see the reallocation of workers. And we find that labor are reallocating from the informal sector to are reallocating to the informal segment of the manufacturing sector, which is growth reducing. At the same time, there is kind of shift going from the informal, from the formal part to the informal, more productive informal part of the informal sector. But this is not sufficient to offset this negative effect of the previous reallocation that we found. So now we move to the third chapter, which is about the supply chains here and collaboration between formal and informal firms. So in sub-Saharan Africa, the manufacturing sector is highly fragmented and dominated by the informal sector. And this actually is limited to the what the literature is already telling in GVC-based literature, like profiting and learning process that should happen in this kind of collaboration. So this chapter examines how the collaboration between formal and informal supply chains affect productivity and profitability in this context. But here we emphasize also on human capital as one of the channels to facilitate possible knowledge and technology transfer within these possible supply chains. So the data source here is the firm level data with surveys that are nationally representative, and the same questionnaire from all those countries. So it covers more than 13,000 informal firms from Sub-Saharan Africa. and and approved by many international organizations invested by them as well. So the methodology used here is, we started with the OLS regression with country fees first and sector fees as well. But regarding the bias that we've seen there, we check, we use for the indigeneity concern that might happen, we move to the labor statistic-based identification technique to solve these possible issues. So as a finding, we found that the formal backward linkages are the most significant one, the formal forward linkages. And also we found that informal firms with formal backward linkages exhibits higher significance, productivity and profitability than those who are linked to the formal firms. So this shows that there is kind of productivity gains happening from these kind of linkages, but this is not automatic because higher human capital is also important to reap and get this knowledge and technology transfer. So let's move now to the chapter 4, which is about labor contract and innovation in India. So in the India manufacturing sector, there is a lot of contract workers happening there, and we're trying to position ourselves between the conventional and economics theory and the evolutionary one, where the conventional was suggesting that labor flexibility improve efficiency and adaptability, while the evolutionary one is highlighting the relationship this kind of the importance of stable employment and this is relationship for accumulating tacit knowledge and leading to innovation. So this chapter is testing this and to see how weak employment, contract employment is affecting innovation and other outcomes. So we use here the plant level data covering more than 500 manufacturing plants, and data is collecting from 2000 to 2015. So the approach used here is the endogenous switching regression model to correct for selection bias. And also, here we use the counterfactual. This is also help us to know the counterfactual to know what will have happened if plants decided to employ high share of contract workers. So as a result, we found that plants with high proportion of contract workers in India achieve short-term profitability gains at the expense of long-term innovation, productivity, and growth. Especially, this is showing us that the reliance of the persistence of the high share of contract worker disrupts the transmission of plant-specific tacit knowledge, which is essential for innovation and so on. So as a conclusion, so we conclude that the manufacturing sector is in developing countries suffering mainly from those three issues. So firstly, related to the persistence of informality, the fragmentation of the supply chains, and labor market precarity. So, and also we found that informality is playing a dual role, one absorbing jobs, but also it also constitutes a drag when it becomes persistent. So the formal, informal supply chains can boost productivity, but only when supported by sufficient human capital and institutional capacity. So also the reliance on contract labor disrupt the transmission of plant-specific tacit knowledge essential for innovation. So quickly, I will go through some recommendations, which is starting from the promotion of formalization through regulation, reforms, and improve institutional support, foster the linkages between formal and informal firms to improve productivity and competitiveness, and investment in human capital development to enhance absorptive capacity and enable technology diffusions. And finally, insensitive firms to have a higher share of permanent workers for them to keep knowledge flowing within the plants, and also like to take benefit from the different tacit knowledge that is happening there. So thank you very much for listening to me. Back to you, dear Director.
Thank you for your presentation. You can stop sharing your screen. Yes. The opposition will be opened by Professor Mone. Professor Mone is an emeritus professor of the economics of innovation at Maastricht University and UNU Merit. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, dear Robert, we haven't had much of a chance to meet at UNU Merit since I left when you arrived, basically. I would have a question. I mean, first of all, congratulations on an interesting thesis on the role and the importance of, or non-importance of, informality. Actually, a few years ago, I had a student, Elvis Avenue. I don't know whether you know him, from Ghana.
I cannot hear you correctly. I don't know, maybe it's from my side here.
Can you hear me?
I think it's okay now.
Okay. I was saying that a few years ago, there was another student at UNU Merit, Elvis Avenue from Ghana, and he wrote a thesis where he showed and he argued that informal firms were very important for innovation in sub-Saharan African countries. So it's kind of interesting to see that you have the opposite view. I have a question on the second chapter of your thesis, where, among other things, you find that in India manufacturing sectors, there has been a shift from formal, more innovative firms to less innovative or less productive informal firms. And this is a drag on productivity growth in India. My question is, why is this the case? Why are these informal firms less productive? Is it a question of technology? Is it a question of less innovation, economies of scale? What would be your explanation for it? And secondly, what could the government do to avoid this problem? I'd be happy to have your comments on this.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for this question. I mean, the informal sector has some key characteristics, and one of them is about the cost advantage that they have. They produce at a lower cost sometimes, and producing at lower cost help them to make some bigger profits, and also that's already one advantage, which is that already the firm's advantage that they can have in terms of profit. Another one can be at the macro level regarding the government's issues related to corruptions and some other things related to the well-functioning of the formal sector. So some firms might prefer to move to the informal sector for them to make more profit, and also to avoid tax payment, for instance, or to avoid some regulation that are affecting them. So that's why some of them might move from formality to the informal sector. For the government, how they can solve this issue is mainly to work and to keep the formal firms in formality. So they keep them in the formal sector by working on the different regulations. So incentivize them, giving them some incentive to stay formal. For instance, if you formalize your activities, there is kind of tax reduction that you may receive. There will be kind of business that you're going to access into. There is kind of they can give them the opportunity to have access to some public markets and so on. So And this is one reason, and also education can also be one of the reason, one of the things that the government can do to incentivize them to stay in the formal firms.
Yes, let me challenge, if I may, on your first reaction. If firms move to the informal sector or become more informal because they make more profits, then how come you have less productivity?
Yeah, if they make, the productivity may be less because, the productivity that we are talking here about is like the average productivity to be less. It's not all the firms that are informal that are less productive. Some of them are more productive, but some of them are less productive. But on average, the less productive firms are higher than the more productive one. So that's why, that's what we see from the data. And on average, it's bring back down the aggregate productivity.
Okay, so it's a question of aggregation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Calderola, who is an economist at the European Commission. Please go ahead, Dr. Calderola.
Thank you very much, Director. Thank you very much, Robert, for a very nice and clean presentation. And I also enjoyed reading your thesis. It was well written and very interesting on a topic which has been neglected recently, which is informality. There's some literature that sits a little bit of the intersection between development economics, innovation, structural change that has drawn some interest in the concept of informality. And I think you tackle it from a different perspective, which includes also evolutionary theories, which have not really focused a lot on the concept of informality. And we actually try to draw a linkage between these theories and the concept of informality. And my question actually revolves around the theoretical underpinnings of especially chapter 4, where you sort of claim that you challenge the neoclassical view on the role of contract labor or temporary labor, using evolutionary theories, which somehow promote the role of stable jobs to favor the conservation of passive knowledge and nurturing of skills within the firm. However, I would like to partially contest this statement in the sense that probably the fact that stable jobs are conducive for innovation and improved firm performance are a corollary of some evolutionary theories, but are not the central point of evolutionary theories. So evolutionary theories could actually be used to propose an alternative explanation. For instance, the dynamic capabilities by Thies, 1994, very famous paper that you also cite in your thesis, may lead us to think that actually labor circulation could be something that allows tacit knowledge to circulate across firms. And this is something that has been also seen in the cluster literature or in the evolutionary economic geography literature that has put a lot of emphasis on agglomeration externalities, spillovers, and so on. So I would like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more on how evolutionary theories can be used first to understand informality, of which contract labor is part of. Contract labor is an informal practice, even in formal firms. And second, how do you rule out alternative explanations? How can you convince us that the evolutionary proposition of stable jobs as something conducive for innovation is the only explanation that can be deployed to understand the relationship between contract labor and innovation?
Thank you, dear esteemed opponent. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the chapter 4 mainly about plants that are formal plants. So there is it's not related directly to the informal firms, but only the formal plants that we've considered there. This is a very important question in the sense that yeah, so the tacit knowledge that are within the firms, the kind of knowledge that are circulating within the firms is the arguments used mainly by the evolutionary theory, which is also valid here, because mainly in developing countries, if the workers doesn't have some kind of they don't stay in the firm for a very long period. I mean, it's a relative long period. It's difficult for them sometimes to embed themselves within the firms, understand the structure of how everything is working first. This is already related to the management side of the firm. So understand the management side, the structure, how everything is well structured before contributing in terms of knowledge and so on. And this is already one of the tacit knowledge we are talking about, which is already within the firms and circulating from one worker to the another one within the firm and so on. So that would be my my answer to the question. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Just a quick follow-up on this. Page 94, you cite Ikino and Rifan, 2005. And she's, well, Ikino is very famous in Italy for being one of the main proponents of flexible labor markets. Actually, I think you kind of miscite the paper here because you say that Ikino warns that the temporary worker employment may dissuade workers training hard competency improvement and lead to a declining task knowledge within firms. Actually, Ikino in this paper and his co-author, they show that excessive labor production may actually create an incentive for firms to not show up at work. So the main object of the research there is the relationship between workers and absenteeism. Now, besides the fact that probably the paper should be cited somewhere else in the chapter, do you think you can convince us that, because you show us a case, the one of contract labor and firm performance evaluation, etc., but it's hard to think about of a counterfactual. So if instead of temporary workers we had, or contract workers, we had very strong, stiff labor protection, what would have been the scenario? Do you think your identification strategy allows us to make a consideration around this, or it's something that we would like to explore in further research?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, first of all, I'm not totally against the temporary workers employment, but what what we found from the work is that it's the high share. I mean, the higher reliance on it is something that we are challenging here. So the idea is like we still need to find like a balance and have a higher share of permanent worker within our firms, especially in Africa, even if we are still having the other workers, those who are not permanent. So those who, I mean, as we already have the higher share, they are going to help them with the knowledge that is already embedded within the firm, sharing this knowledge with them for innovation, the outcomes, and so on that I was discussing about. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The opposition will be continued by Dr. Vicentin, who is an associate professor in economics of innovation at Maastricht University, and your merit. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, dear candidate, dear Robert, it is a pleasure to see you today in this occasion, and I join my colleagues in congratulating with you about this great achievement. In particular, in your thesis, I like also your ability to create connection across chapter, so building cohesive work. My question related to chapter 2. So in this chapter, you consider a specific time frame from 1980 to 2011. I wonder if, apart from the data availability, you had in mind another logic in the choice of this time frame. And I wonder if changing the time frame, and in particular to have more updated data, if you think that this would change your result. Maybe also connecting with Pierre's question about the fact that you find that informality is associated with a lower productivity. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, dear esteemed opponent, for this question. Yeah, for the data, it's because the disaggregation stops at 2012. The disaggregation within formal and informal segments stops. So that's why we already consider from 1980 to 2011, which will have been really important or good to see what will have happened when we start from 12 to now, or 12 to 2023. But I will be surprised if the results is different, because I mean the main reason why this is the case is that the informality is still increasing in developing countries, especially in Africa and India, and is still persistent at some point. So its persistency means that this issue of informal sector being a drag on the aggregate productivity will still be an issue till now, even if we consider a new data set or a recent data set in our sample. I would be really surprised if the result is different. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
The discussion will be continued by Professor Beldenbos, who is a full professor of strategy at the Catholic University of Leuven, as well as a professor of international corporate strategy at Maastricht University and UU Merit. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Prorector. Dear Robert, dear candidate, congratulations on the completion of your dissertation. I read it with interest, and I think it contains 3 quite nice essays on the role of informality, human capital, for manufacturing firms' growth and performance, in the context then of emerging markets and developing economies. What I think I appreciated most is the different methodologies and settings in the 3 chapters, with the shift share analysis on the sectoral level in the first chapter, then regression analysis using some instruments, heteroscedasticity-based instruments for sub-Saharan firms in the second chapter, chapter 3, and the endogenous switching model in chapter 4. And one of your papers has been published already in a reputable international journal. So overall, well done. But as you know, my task is to ask critical questions today, and to ask you to reflect on some of your results and some things that you're writing in your dissertation. So my questions are on chapter 3, where you analyze the relationship between backward linkages of informal firms with formal firms as suppliers and their performance. You find a positive relationship, and this positive relationship between backward linkages and informal firms' performance is strengthened if these informal firms have a higher education level of their workers. That's my summary of the chapter. But you have on page 55 a slightly different claim, and I would like you to reflect on this first. So I quote what you write on page 55. You say that your study, the impact of firm linkages in supply chains on the transfer of practices, technologies, workers, and knowledge from more productive formal firms to less productive informal firms. Can I ask you, if you reflect on this, what is incorrect in these claims?
Yes. Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for this question. Yes, this is one of the claims, but this claim is the forward-backward linkages, forward linkage, right? So we had backward linkages and forward linkages. So the backward linkages are informal firms sourcing from the formal one, right? and the forward one is from the informal to the formal firms. So what we refer to now is the formal one, right? The backward linkage, right?
Okay, so you say so this statement doesn't show that I only focus on the backward linkages.
Okay, so yeah,
that's one.
Exactly. So as I said before, I mean, some of the informal firms are also they also have some capabilities. It's not only like all of them are having lower level of education level, lower level of knowledge and so on. So some of them have a higher level. So yeah, this claim is maybe should be put in the context like some of the informal firms as well. They also share their knowledge with the formal firms with some practices. For instance, there is kind of local knowledge that formal firm doesn't have, because the informal firms are directly in touch with the consumers. And sometimes the formal firms goes through the informal one. And those formal firms have a lot of knowledge regarding the consumption, regarding the taste and so on. And those information can also be shared with the formal firms. So that's why I was saying that sometimes the knowledge is also going in both directions in this sense.
Yeah, but that doesn't really link up to your claim, no? So simple questions. I don't see in your chapter that you focus on transfer of practices. I don't see that you analyze transfer of technologies or movement of workers, or movement or knowledge between informal and formal firms, right?
Yeah.
So that is not what you study.
No, it's mainly about the knowledge and so on. But yeah, the practices also are shared at some points, but from the informal to the formal, it happens sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't study it. So the point is that those are your implied mechanisms, but you don't have evidence that these mechanisms are actually at work.
Yeah.
You just simply look at the correlation between backward linkages from formal firms and informal firm performance.
Yeah.
And there's also no productivity of these suppliers that you have in your equation. But anyway, so that is one thing to have it to correct. But another thing that I wanted to ask your view on is the role of human capital. So you have mediation and moderation. Those are two distinct mechanisms in the literature. They have received quite some attention in the literature. And in your dissertation, on page 4, page 116, and in chapter 3 on page 55, you say that you analyze the mediating role of absorptive capacity. On page 54, there's one instance where you actually state that absorptive capacity has a moderating role. So both terms are used in the dissertation. So I'd like to settle this once and for all. Suppose we have a relationship between A and B, which is then mediated or moderated by C. Yeah, what would be actually then a mediating relationship, and what would be a moderating relationship in your view? And then we get to the answer or the question, what are you actually studying in your chapter 3?
Yeah, I mean, it's the mediating relationship. I was trying to see how firms can learn through the collaboration between formal and informal firms through education. So it's the mediating role that I was trying to.
But what is the mediating relationship between A and B, and with C the mediator?
The mediator is education, right?
No. What is that? How does it go? What is the mechanism?
Oh, okay.
How is the causality link?
Oh, okay. I mean, you mean from the political side, right? Political recommendation side, or
no, from the technical. It's a technical question. It's
yeah.
conceptual.
So I mean, one way is for firms to I mean, for the mediation, for them to have like kind of, I mean, the role of the education, how the education is going to play the mediation role is that firms are already working together. And those who are the informal firms, they already have a certain level of education. And those who have high level of education are going to profit more from this relationship, right? So when it's come to firms that have workers with lower level of education, this is actually going to limit the transfer knowledge, which is going to happen there. So yeah, the knowledge transfer is going to happen, but those who already have a higher level of education is the one who is going to make profit more from this.
Yeah. So a mediating relationship in the literature means that A has no direct effect on B, but A affects C and then C affects B. So that is the mediating rule. It goes not directly, it goes indirect. Moderating effect is that you have a causal link between A and B, which is then strengthened or weakened by C. Okay, so what are you estimating in your chapter 3?
The mediative rule.
No, the moderating rule. You say it's mediating, but it's moderating. There is a causal link between A and B, between linkages and performance, and you say that this is strengthened for firms that have higher education level. So that's a moderating relationship. You're right on page 54, but you're wrong on all the other pages.
Okay.
Your dissertation. Okay. Sorry to bother you with this.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's fine.
I think this is a good point to have the discussion continued by Dr. Wang, who is an associate professor of emerging technologies at Maastricht University and UNU Merit. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear candidate, dear Robert. First, I also like to join my colleagues to congratulate you on finishing your thesis, which is interesting. I enjoyed a lot of reading it, especially regarding your discussion on labor market dynamics that shape industry growth and innovation in developing economies. I think it's very relevant, especially to very relevant also to the research we do in our institute. So I have a question related to chapter 4. In chapter 4, you find a negative ATT, which is you found the negative effect of a high share of contract workers on plant innovation, productivity, and growth, but positive ATT on profit. So your estimates show that lower innovation, you would have lower innovation when contract labor is high. You explain this with weaker tacit knowledge and weaker learning by doing. I think this is plausible. I think this is a reasonable explanation. However, my question would be here related to this section is how do you really show that the innovation decline is driven by lower tacit knowledge accumulation? And how do you rule out other channels? For instance, like less worker training or higher turnover or weaker incentives, etc.
Yeah, thank you, dear esteemed opponent. So thank you for this question. Yeah, by my mechanism and what I understood from this is and from our analysis is that firms that have the high share and that rely mostly on contract workers, they have kind of less chance to see the knowledge that are within the firms, flowing within the firms, this knowledge staying and also being learned and used and so on. And that's one reason. The other one is about the commitment of the workers. So, this might also be a reason, because when you are a firm and you rely on the contract workers with less incentive maybe, so those workers are likely less committed to the work and so on. So, and the innovation, yeah. So when you have a lot of contract workers within the firms, so this might disrupt a kind of knowledge flowing, and this knowledge related to some specific products might make that, the firms can innovate, but less compared to the other firms that are not relying a lot on the contract workers.
And then, if I may, I just briefly follow up. How do you distinguish those two different mechanisms? One is within, as a kind of learning by doing, weaker commitment, lower training. But from other channels, could be like related to the kind of structure change, related to a product mix or short-term or long-term management strategies, etc., or competitive pressures. How do you distinguish those different channels? Can you briefly kind of elaborate on there?
Yeah. Please, can you come again for the first channel that you mentioned? Sorry. The first channel that you mentioned, I didn't hear it correctly. Sorry.
Basically, you distinguish different kind of mechanisms, whether innovation loss comes from the reduced accumulation of tacit knowledge, and also there could be other channels from the change of product mix or short-term or long-term management strategies. Or kind of competitive pressure from outside, etc. Just different channels. It can be there can be different mechanisms. It seems that you explain one type, but you do not really mention other types. Have you thought about it?
Yes, and the practices within the firms is also, I think this is the one you are mentioning, right? So yeah, the practices is within the firm is also something which is very, very important. And those practices, if you are having kind of short-term workers, every time you have to go through them and every time, and when another worker comes, and it's going to be another work in this direction. So it's like a lot of it's already time consuming, and also at the same moment, compared to the workers that are permanent, so they already know the structure, how everything is working, and it's easier for them to move forward and go to the creation, move to new ideas, move to new products creation and innovation and so on. So I think, you're right. So this can also be a channel to this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All opponents now have had a chance to ask their first questions, which means that we are at the end of the first round and now continue to the second round, which implies the word again is to Professor Mone for his second question.
Yes, thank you, Prorector. Well, now that you have warmed up, Robert, let me ask you a more technical question on chapter 3. In this chapter, you use the Lubel method of heteroscedasticity-based instrumental variables. You probably know that this method rests on two assumptions. First, you must have heteroscedasticity in your error terms. And secondly, correlation between the error terms. If you don't have these two, then this method doesn't work very well. Have you checked whether there is heteroscedasticity, or have you at least an argument for the presence of heteroscedasticity and the absence of correlation between the error terms?
Yeah, dear esteemed opponent, highly esteemed opponent. Yeah, this is a very good question. Yeah, for this to work, is mainly about the correlation and so on. Yeah, this is something that we already checked first during the analysis before we move to its implementation. And this methodology is also creating, I mean, from the model, the instruments that are directly used to solve the endogeneity issues. Yeah. So for both, we check the error term correlation and so on. Yeah.
Okay, because you don't report it. It would be good to report this to convince the reader that this estimation method is good. And let me then ask a second question is, if you compare your results from the Lubin method, table 3.5, and I'm going to concentrate on column 5, where we look at productivity, and you control for country and sector dummies, which to me is probably the most, the best estimate that you have. You see that formal backward is not significant, right? That's already a first point. The second one, if you compare the results from table 3.5 with those from table 3.7, where you allow for this moderating effect, if I may come back to that discussion that you had before, there you see that suddenly forward backward is strongly significant and sizable, 0.26 or 27 compared to almost nothing in table 3.5. So what is the explanation that you have for this? Why do you have these different results? And which one do you believe in? Is there a role for formal backward, as you argue, or is there no role, as the results from table 3.5 seem to suggest?
Yes, for the OLS, can you hear me?
No, it's not OLS. In both cases, it's the Lubin method. It's with and without the moderating effect of human capital.
Yes, the possible understanding that I have from this is about, I mean, the effects that education is also having on it, because education is also playing a role here. So the effect is maybe increasing, or I mean, I don't know, here because of the role of the education there. So that's the explanation, what I understood from it.
But there you control for education in both cases. You just now introduce the interacting term, and that certainly turns around your results on backward linkages. Right, if you compare column 5 in 3.5 and 3.7. It just, I find it a bit strange. I mean, astonishing, but I don't have any explanation for it. I don't know whether you have. But anyway, something to ponder about.
Dear Kenneth, do you need a few seconds to consider the question, or should we move on? Can you hear me?
Yes, I think there is an issue. I cannot hear you correctly here. I don't know what is happening.
Yeah, the communication is not very good. So
Please, the internet connection.
So did you hear the last question that Professor Molen asked
Seems
you?
that the connection.
Can you hear me, Robert?
Now I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay. So comparing tables 3.5 and 3.7, where in 3.7 the difference is that you introduce the interaction term between education and backward linkages. And suddenly backward linkages becomes significant and important compared to 3.5. So what is the reason for that? What could be an explanation for it? It would be good if you had a paranym.
Yeah, this I don't know what just happened here. I don't know why they. Yeah, I think that is better now. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can hear you now. I mean, I had some issue with the connection. Yeah, please, sorry. Can you repeat again? Sorry, because I
So
didn't hear.
I'm looking at tables 3.5 and 3.7.
Okay.
Right? Column 5, where you control for country and sector fixed effects. The difference between the two is that in 3.7 you introduce the interaction term between backward linkages and education. Right? And that turns backward linkages to become strong and significant.
Yeah. Yeah. My assumption is that this is. I mean, my understanding to this is the role that of education there, because the education is the one adding to it, like firms that have the backward linkages, their workers, as they have a higher level of education. This is. I mean, this leads to the higher level of the performance that they have. So that's what I understood from the difference between those two tables.
But if you look at the marginal effect, right, the marginal effect in 3.5 is basically 0. And if you look the marginal effect of backward linkages in 3.7, it is higher than 0.25. And it's actually also different from the one that you have from the OLS. So the question is, which one do you believe in all these different specifications?
Yeah, I was actually relying on the one with the interaction term.
Okay.
That's what I was. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
The discussion now will be continued by Dr. Calderola.
Thanks, Corrector. Robert, I have an additional question on probably on the thesis more in general. Kind of an open, which refers to a little bit the contribution that the thesis makes on the literature on informality. We have seen in recent years there's been quite some interest, as I mentioned in my previous intervention, on the role of informality in promoting structural change and productivity growth. There's this manufacturing renaissance hypothesis developed by Macmillan and Roderick. Actually, those that promoted the idea of premature industrialization 10 years ago are now revisiting this hypothesis because they've seen much of the growth in productivity that's been observed in many sub-Saharan African countries actually comes from these superstar informal firms, these right tail of the distribution firms that perform even better than formal ones, which is actually something you mentioned before. There are some informal firms that actually have characteristics that make them closer to productive formal firms than to the bulk of homogeneous basic service firms, often crowding the informal sector. So what do you think your evidence contributes to this debate? What do you think your evidence can be used to understand empirically what we know about current informality? And how do you think this informs also a theoretical debate? You have argued this evolutionary view on, or thesis talks to the previous conceptualization of structuralist view, the legalist view, and you've mentioned also some references to the formal and informal entrepreneurs may decide to do so based on the constraints they have, which is on why do entrepreneurs stay informal? That was a strong theoretical view on structural rigidities that bring the to stick to the empirical and theoretical contribution with respect to informality. Thanks.
Sorry, can you repeat the very last question? Sorry, because the
summary of the question is what are the empirical and theoretical contributions thesis with respect to the debate on informality?
Yeah, there is a lot of
asked.
You can very briefly conclude your argument and your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is a lot of debates going on regarding the informality. So some of them are like pessimists. So those who think that informality, the relationship between formality and informality should not exist. Some of them are like legalists who also think that this is one of the things very important. We need to bring firms, I mean, through regulations, to bring them to the the formality, and them also to contribute to the overall productivity and growth for the countries. So so our work here is mostly related to the structuralist views. So there are also another view who think that relationship needs to exist between both of them for informal firms to bring themselves into to help them bring them also into the market, to do these relations, and also to help them also formalize their activity. So this work is more related to the structural view, thinking that we don't need to neglect informality. So they are part of the economy, and we need to bring them also when we are taking into account any analysis, any study when it's come to the economy.
Thank you. Gbenoukpo Robert Djidonou. The time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Dear candidates, dear Gbenoukpo Robert Djidonou, the degree committee here present online has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Pietro Belli is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor now to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear Robert, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present online, I hereby confer upon you, Gbenoukpo Robert Djidonou, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, you will soon receive the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the supervisor, affixed with the official seal of the university, shown by the beadle.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, Dr. Matthew will take the floor to say the laudatio for you. So please go ahead.
Dear Dr. Gbenoukpo Robert Djidonou, dear Robert, congratulations on your thesis and defense. It's a proud moment for you, your family, and all of us who have been part of this journey. We first met in late 2018 when I joined UniMerit, and I was asked whether I would offer an elective course to the PhD students. I did, and you were one among the students who took it. Our interaction began there. You engaged seriously, you were generous in your feedback, and our conversations continued well beyond the classroom. Our working relationship also helped, I admit. It was also helped by a crucial alignment outside academia, and that's football. We bonded over the enemy of my enemy is my friend principle. You, as a devoted Real Madrid fan, occasionally defeating some of Roma's rival Italian teams in European finals, giving us plenty of material to tease the Italian crowd and at times Barcelona fans too. Well, but coming back to the academic side, I should say that the same combination I saw in those football moments, energy, persistence, patience, and a willingness to take on the difficult battles, was also present in your research. And it came with another trait that everyone who has worked with you will recognize, your calm mindset. Academic life throws impossible deadlines at all of us. Not everyone stays composed. You do. You reassure everyone, and somehow, against all evidence and predictions, it gets done. And importantly, that calm was never an excuse to start late. On the contrary, you were one of the PhD students who had ideas early on. I remember very well how early you began to articulate what you wanted to study. You spoke to different faculty members, tested your arguments, and refined your questions. Your topics evolved over time, and I see that not as uncertainty, but as learning. The intellectual maturity to let evidence and context shape the research questions, while still holding on to a clear core research agenda that ran through the whole PhD. What struck me from the beginning was that you were never unaware of the more fashionable topics, those that often appear attractive because they seem immediately relevant for the job market. You simply chose a harder path. You wanted to study the questions that look straightforward on the surface, but that do not actually work the way we assume when we examine real economies, especially in the developing context. And that brings me to what I value most about your work. It's about how economies actually function beneath the surface. Rather than focusing on large firms, formal rules, idealized markets, you chose to study the spaces in between, the network linking firms, the blurred boundaries between formal and informal activity, and the way productivity depends on skills, relationships, and learning, not only on machines and regulations. You start from a very sharp and timely diagnosis that manufacturing remains central to development, yet many developing economies face stagnation or premature deindustrialization, driven not only by the classic market failures, but by deeper systemic frictions such as persistent informality and precarious labor markets. And you do not shy away from uncomfortable questions. Your work challenges the idea that more flexibility is always better, showing that when employment becomes too unstable, it can undermine learning, innovation, and long-term growth. So these are not fashionable conclusions, but they are careful, evidence-based, and important. And your intellectual seriousness is matched by something equally valuable, how you show up for others. You have consistently been the person other PhDs turn to when quantitative tools become intimidating. You are genuinely passionate about mathematics, and you have translated that passion into generosity, teaching, explaining, troubleshooting, and doing it with patience and good humor. You have strengthened not only your own work, but the capacity of the research community around you. You're also remarkably entrepreneurial in spirit, full of ideas, energy, and unusually open. There is almost no project that one can propose to you and you would say no. And Robert, we should also acknowledge the resilience behind this achievement. Completing a PhD is demanding under any circumstances, but you managed to do it while carrying responsibilities far beyond the typical workload, including raising a family with 5 children. And as the story goes, this was not the result of an ambitious long-term planning model. You aimed for a 3rd child, and life replied to you with triplets. So while most PhD candidates learn about shocks and volatility from the data, you lived it daily at home. I believe it required a lot of improvisation, perseverance, and probably a level of logistics that deserves its own dissertation. And somehow, through all of it, you never lost the seriousness of your work. So today, this thesis is not just a set of essays. It's a meaningful contribution to development and innovation studies, one that helps us understand how industrial growth is shaped by informality, capabilities, and the structure of work itself. It's also a testament to who you are as a scholar and colleague, rigorous, generous, energetic, and persistent. Robert, congratulations. I'm proud to have supervised you, and so is Neil and Carlo. I cannot wait what you do next.
Dear Dr. Djidonou, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. And of course, I extend my congratulations also to your family and friends who have undoubtedly been watching. Hereby, I declare this ceremony ended.
Congratulations, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you.
Félicitations.
Congratulations. Félicitations.
Thank you.
Many
Congratulations.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations and all the best for your career.
Thank you. Thank you, Lily.
Dear Robert, on behalf of the PhD office and the technical support, I would like to congratulate you and your supervisors. We are going to be in touch very soon about how you're going to be able to get the degree to your home. Me personally, thank you for making me part of your adventure.
Thank you very much.
Much happiness for you and your family in the future.